Kenya's Supreme Court will handle any challenges to the result of last week's presidential election in a fair and speedy manner. This, of course, according to the country's Chief Justice, 2 days after defeated candidate Raila Odinga threatened legal action over the outcome. Uhuru Kenyatta, indicted for crimes against humanity, was declared the winner on Saturday. Odinga refused, of course, to concede. Joining us now to discuss the implications of the challenge is Reuters business journalist Duncan Miriri. Later on, we will also be joined by Ibrahim Fakir from the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Duncan, of course, some people celebrating, other parts of Kenya gloomy, everything resting there on the Supreme Court outcome. Take us to what the mood is right now in Kenya. Is there a sense that it's over and done with for Odinga, or do people still believe that the Supreme Court can change the course of events?
Thanks, Karima. I think the mood here is, there's a collective sigh of relief across the country that elections came and went last week and the sky didn't fall. A president, the president-elect was announced. Obviously, the petition, it's not over in the sense that the Code Coalition wants to take a petition to the Supreme Court. I think I think there's a sense whereby people are quite satisfied by the coalition's decision to go to court instead of the sort of scenario we saw 5 years ago when the losing, when some candidates called on their supporters to come out on the street. And now it'll be a few days before people can, before the petition, the petition can be filed at the Supreme Court. And then I think people are sort of just, relieved that the process will go through the court, and then the court, the 6 judges of the Supreme Court will make a decision on it.
Mm-hmm. Now, Duncan, do you think that there is sufficient belief in the independence of the court, and do you think that the Kenyan electorate at large will abide by whatever outcome the court does eventually make?
I think there is broad consensus that the judiciary can be trusted. Remember, this is an institution that has undergone a lot of reforms ever since the new constitution was enacted in 2010. A new chief justice was appointed, and the process of appointing the chief justice and his deputy was quite transparent. There were live interviews on television and that sort of thing. The chief justice has carried out a number of several robust reforms within the judiciary, including vetting of all judges and magistrates and that kind of thing. I think there's a sense that the judiciary can be trusted to sort of carry out its role of looking at these petitions arising from the elections. And I think most people, Odinga himself told the press on Saturday when he said he's not going to concede, he's going to go to court. I think he said, he was asked and he said he will, his side will abide by the decision that will be made by the court.
Mm-hmm. Ibrahim, let me bring you in here. Of course, you spent quite some time in Kenya. You observed the elections. We now have a situation where one of the contenders contesting the outcome, the matter is before the Supreme Court. Your take, do you think Kenyans will accept the outcome of the court? And if so, how do we proceed from here?
Well, of course, one hopes that the Kenyans will accept the outcome of the court. I think that there is significant trust in the new institutions established in Kenya since the 2010 referendum and the adoption of a new constitution, because the new constitution does indeed create institutions which are independent. I think previously, if you thought about Kenya, what you thought about was presidential prerogative, that every institution was controlled by the president, was under the president's sway. Very few of them were independent, and now you do have independent institutions which have prescribed timelines for adjudicating matters. So, for instance, we'll know 14 days after this petition is actually filed as a duty imposed on the court to make a finding and a determination. Mm-hmm. So I think Kenyans do have trust in the institutions. Let's hope that the peace actually is maintained and that it stays. Mm-hmm. I think it would be irresponsible if politicians engage in a process where they actually start stoking up fires. Now, I also think it's been fairly ill-advised of the camp continuing to make statements rather than actually just simply getting on with filing the petition before the court. Mm-hmm. The reality of the fact of the matter is that 90% of polling stations were covered by party agents of Mr. Odinga's party. About 80% of those have actually signed off on the tallied papers at the end of the process. So quite how he's going to sort of do away with the reconciliation of what is reconciled between his party agent signatures and what is finally tallied, I don't know.
Duncan, we've heard from Ibrahim saying that Mr. Odinga's party agents were in fact at those polling stations. They signed off on the results. Surely that weakens his case in front of the Supreme Court.
I think you're absolutely right. All parties were represented at these polling stations, and there was a bit of haggling, there was a bit of back and forth between the CORD coalition and the IBC during the process of tallying last week. Now, but I think the coalition has named a 10-man legal team. They think they can build a case. They're working on that. I think a lot of lawyers in this town are looking forward to see the papers actually being filed and seeing the sort of prayers that the coalition, Odinga's coalition will take to the court. I think they believe they do have a case. The Prime Minister himself, when he addressed the press on Saturday, cited 2 constituencies, where he said, the voter register was tampered with in one, and he said results from one constituency, was announced twice, and there are discrepancies. So I guess the key thing here is to wait for the petition to be filed, and then we'll be able to talk about the merits of the case a bit better when you see the actual submissions.
Okay. What I want to focus now on, gentlemen, of course, is the issue around Mr. Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta is the winner, subject to the outcome of course, of this court, but he's indicted in front of the International Criminal Court. And we know, of course, that by choosing him, Kenyans, in many ways, some people will argue, have shown the middle finger to the ICC. Let's start with you, Ibrahim. You were in the country. Was the ICC a factor, and what does this mean for institutions like the ICC to hold African leaders, or in fact any other leader that signs up to the ICC, accountable?
Karima, the ICC case colored the way in which the Kenyan election unfolded. Now, there's some people who said, well, it's a referendum on the ICC case. I'm not sure that I would go that far, because Kenyans weren't deciding on the ICC case. They were deciding who their president is. But it formed a part of the political campaign. Some people tried to stop Mr. Kenyatta from running. The Supreme Court had actually cleared him to run, thereby asserting the independence and the sovereignty of Kenya. So I think that was an important step. Now, I think where the real challenges are going to lie is in the governance challenge. The governance challenge is, here's a guy and a fellow who's going to have to appear before court in The Hague while also running the country. Now, you can't run a country via Skype. Even though technology does allow us to do things these days, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. But the important point is that I think Kenyans believe that they have the institutions which are going to run government. So it doesn't matter whether Mr. Kenyatta is around or not. They will, in fact, be run. But 2 significant issues. One is that the case against the head of the public service has been dropped earlier on today, as far as I know. And I suspect one of the witnesses is going to recant further, and the case may, in fact, well be dropped.
Duncan, power is, or rather politics is as much about power as it is about perception. The perception that we have a president-elect who is also an indictee for crimes against humanity at a perceptional level is not good for Kenya. How is the Kenyan business community dealing with the choice of the Kenyan people, and how does it affect Kenya as a destination for investment?
I think that question can be best addressed by the statement we had from the finance minister today. He called the media, and he was very bullish. He said he expects foreign direct, capital inflows to pick up, foreign direct investment. He also expects tourists to start flocking, to start coming back to the country. And indeed, he went as far as saying the country's economic growth will accelerate as a result of the fact that the country held peaceful polls, the sky didn't fall, there was no violence and that kind of thing. But business people privately, I think the thing to remember about frontier markets like Kenya is, you could have issues of perception, but let's face it, businessmen are, business people are looking at the bottom line, and I think as things stand now, we are going to have to wait and see how things unfold. But as things stand now, there is a lot of profit to be made here, and certainly that will keep investors motivated.
I want to come back to the issue of business, being the bottom line. Let's go into how the international diplomats that are based in Kenya are dealing with this matter, because in many ways it's uncharted territory. We have a president-elect who's appearing before this court. How have they interpreted this information, and more importantly, how have they interacted with the man that is likely to in fact lead Kenya, and what restrictions does the ICC process place on that interaction between the international community and Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta? Duncan.
Karima, without evading your question, it's early days. I think diplomats are sort of, it's a conundrum for, they're sort of trying to figure out how to deal with him. We saw the sort of congratulatory messages that came in on Saturday after the election results were announced, avoided, most Western powers avoided congratulating the president-elect by name. Rather, they were congratulating the Kenyan people for holding peaceful polls. Clearly, there is a dilemma for them because they don't want to seem to be too cozy with our president, who's an indictee at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. But I think a lot of people will, a lot of people are going to have to sort of, come up with a strategy, figure out how they're going to deal with the president-elect in case his win is confirmed by the Supreme Court. The only difference here, just a quick note, is that the Chinese sent a congratulatory messages. A congratulatory message to Uhuru Kenyatta and congratulated him by name, which is sort of, differs slightly from what the line that the Western powers took.
Yes, of course, Ibrahim, Kenya's most famous son or half son is, of course, Barack Obama. Again, congratulating the Kenyan people, avoiding having to deal with someone who's indicted for war crimes. How does this issue impact on the AU and of course the AU's respect for the International Criminal Court, especially if one looks at the situation facing the Sudanese President Bashir?
Yeah. Well, I think the AU will split. Individual countries will follow the course as they do with respect to Bashir. But there are more important reasons why the West won't do this. They've got instrumental reasons why they can't. I mean, Kenya is not just a regional hub, it's also a regional buffer. It's a regional hub for trade, information, technology and finance, but it's also a regional buffer in the sense that it is the country that the West uses to channel aid into countries like failed state Somalia on the border. More importantly, this is a key ally, not because the Cold War is still there, we know that's long dead, but the war on terror still is very much there. And so, without Kenya, there's no regional power. And so that's what Kenya is. So as much as they're trying to avoid it, I'm afraid the West, for instrumental reasons, are going to have to deal with this guy in very different terms.